Hello! With the Euro 2024 qualifiers approaching very soon, I figured to bring back the tier list. This is the first tier list we're doing related to the Euro 2024 qualifiers, and today I'm going to be ranking the underdogs that are participating. Now, how would I classify an underdog in these qualifiers? The only teams that I'm putting in this list, and it might seem unfair, but I'm only choosing the teams that are in pots 3, 4, 5, or 6. I'm fully aware that there's some teams in pot 2 that you could argue are not as good as some of the teams in pot 3. For example, Norway on paper is probably a better team than Israel. Sure, Israel are in pot 2, Norway are in pot 3. The pots are there for a reason, guys. It's somewhat of an evaluation of how each of the teams have been doing recently. Norway failed to be in pot 2 because they bottled their Nations League run at the end to Serbia. I know I'm going to get people complaining about this, but I do think it's fair to just stick from pot 3 to 6 as the underdogs in this tier list. And regardless, I am breaking this tier list down from group to group anyway, where I am basing this list off of how likely I think each of these teams have a chance to qualify. Of course, no hate is intended for any of these teams. I would love for most of them to prove me wrong, to be honest. After this tier list, I will be releasing a few prediction videos now that the first round of matches are coming soon. And in order to prepare for the match day predictions, I've been doing my best to get scorelines right across other competitions on Pooky. On this website, as I've stated before, the game has been in their free-to-play stage, and if you get scorelines correct, you will receive Magic currency along with Pooky balls. Pooky balls essentially give you different types of boosts that will affect your scorelines for each prediction. Now though, once you rank yourself up to level 10 after getting scorelines correct, you'll be added to the whitelist for a massive sale for some of the rarest Pooky balls on the 28th of February. If you've been getting solid predictions already, this is the perfect opportunity for you to start taking advantage of the play and earn mode. If you own these rare Pooky balls, you can start playing and challenging for those weekly rewards as always with the higher advantage. Once you own the Pooky ball, you can't lose it. You can level it and make it more powerful the more you play and predict, while also competing for the $500 worth of Magic each match day for each league. To start all this for free and grind to level 10 for this incredible opportunity, make sure you click the link in the description below. Usually on the tier list, we just do it based off letter grade, but this time I've added more particular categories. At the top, we've got failure is not an option, meaning if this team bottles their qualifier group, I think it would be a massive upset for them. They really should be qualifying for the Euros. That's what I'm implying at. At the second category, I've put high hopes, which means the team's going into this qualifier run in solid form, or they have another reason to be confident going into these qualifiers. The could surprise category implies for itself. I mean, they're the countries that many people are sleeping on, yet I do see them having some decent results here and there, maybe even barely qualifying for the tournament. Not looking good obviously means that chances are very low, and little to no chance means I have almost no faith in your country to qualify. You know what? I'm going to be a bit brutal here and write no chance. I don't mean to be rude, guys, but there truly are some nations that have never qualified for any major tournament. They usually finish second to last place or last place, so we got to be a bit brutal here. Again, no hates intended. Let's start off with Group A. Our first underdog that people might argue shouldn't be labeled as one if Scotland isn't labeled as one, but I already explained to you my rules. We're going to be starting off with Norway, and Norway obviously has a lot of high expectations despite not qualifying for the Euros very much in their history. In fact, they only have properly once in 2000. It obviously feels a bit weird that we've seen Holland grow and become an amazing player over the years, but he happened to miss the last Euro competition along with the last World Cup, along with Odegaard, of course. Both of those two have been fantastic in the Premier League this season. Their youngster Schjelderup has just joined Benfica. That's just how you know he's one for the future. Another personal favorite of mine, a player that has just joined Borussia Dortmund this transfer window, Julian Ryerson, made such an impact at Union Berlin. An incredible aggressive defender that's only looking better over time. A lot of more players to talk about, obviously, but I think the point is clear. Norway are for sure a nation in this tier list that failure is just not an option for them. Despite not having great history qualifying for this tournament, Norway cannot bottle this. With the quality they possess, they are expected to go through. Yes, their group is difficult. They're going to have a lot of hurdles. Whether or not you think Norway will qualify for the tournament or not, I think we can all agree. Their expectations are going to be high, especially with the fact that they're going to really need to go all out, as all the other teams apart from Cyprus in this group all already have secured a playoff spot due to their Nations League success. Like I said, Norway bottled theirs to Serbia at the very end, so they could have been in the same position and have more security for those playoffs, but they don't. So they really got to do their best, and they definitely got to strive for at least second. Now let's move on to Georgia. Like I said, Georgia have topped their Nations League group. They were in League C, but it's still very impressive the fashion they did it in, undefeated with 5 wins. It's also where we really saw the likes of Kvicha absolutely excel. He earned a move to Napoli shortly after that first stretch of the Nations League break. He has simply evolved to one of the best players this season, definitely one of the best in the Serie A. Of course, though, as we all know, football's a team sport. They can't just rely on one player, but they have a lot of other underrated gems on this team as well. Marmardashvili, the Valencian goalkeeper, has definitely been making his mark and catching eyes by many. Still very young and has loads of potential. Čak has been an incredible playmaker for Slovan Bratislava. And another player on this club, also the captain for the Georgia national team, has been a very experienced defender, Guram Kashia. Georgia already have a solid foundation. And in fact, in the World Cup qualifiers, they ruined Sweden's parade before this amazing Nations League run, stopping them from automatically qualifying for the World Cup. Now they're coming up against another Scandinavian nation. It's definitely possible for them to ruin Norway's parade now. Norway always have a strong start in these qualifier campaigns and then just seem to fade away at the end, and maybe Georgia can take advantage of that repetitive pattern. I'm going to put Georgia at high hopes because they have every reason to have the high hopes. I mean, they're in fantastic form right now. They have an incredible attacker that's absolutely balling out, and the team spirit just seems to be there. Their last match was a loss to Morocco in a friendly before the World Cup. If it weren't for that match though, they would have been undefeated in 2022. Now for Cyprus, the biggest underdog in Group A. They do have some exciting players like Lozois Lizo, the 19-year-old winger, but this side in their history has never qualified for the World Cup or the Euros. I'm sorry, Cyprus, maybe you can give us a show here and there, but I think you're the first team to be in that no chance pile. Now we're going to be moving on to Group B, which is definitely very interesting. I'm very curious to see who wins the battle between Ireland and Greece. Of course, France and Netherlands look like absolute favorites in this group, but both Ireland and Greece have a lot of interesting talking points. So let's start off with Ireland first. The national team has been a bit underwhelming recently. There's no denying that. They had some interesting displays at the end of the World Cup qualify run last time around, but very much struggled before. They were very back and forth in their Nations League run, but Ireland definitely have a potential golden generation on their hands that we could see excel over this year. First off, they got 2 young impressive goalkeepers in the Premier League, Gavin Bazunu on Southampton and Kelleher on Liverpool. Above either option, you've got a young, energetic, versatile backline as well with the likes of Nathan Collins on Wolves and Dara O'Shea, captain of West Brom. There's many gems in the midfield as well that didn't really get the opportunity yet to shine for the national team, but they surely will in the future, such as Rako Vata and Justin Fedezai. But one youngster who did make it into the senior team that has been electric for Brighton as well is forward Evan Ferguson. He's proven to be a complete center forward despite not always getting the minutes in the Premier League. I don't want to say they're absolute high hopes yet. I still think those youngsters I mentioned still have a decent amount to solidify themselves, but definitely this squad should be hopeful for the future. I'm going to say they're just under high hopes. I really want to put them up there and be generous, but I'm going to say they're a side that could surprise. Greece probably will be going into more high hopes since they've already secured that playoff spot. They're looking to be in terrific form. They did have quite a dip recently, but they seem to be striving back. Some very solid players in there. Of course, Tsimikas is the biggest example. Captain of the national team, Bakasetas, has obviously been proving himself. Alexandropoulos on Sporting, very exciting central midfielder. With Greece looking to be in great form and them already securing a playoff spot, even if this campaign's a disaster for them and Ireland do surprise, I'm going to say that they still are the ones that are having higher hopes at the moment. And that leaves us with the ultimate underdog in this group, Gibraltar, who unfortunately just seem to have no chance. Yeah, it's going to be tough for this squad to do anything in this group. It's a very difficult one. I really think Ireland and Greece are building momentum, as I've already stated, and Gibraltar won't be able to take advantage of scraping maybe even any points in this group. Now for Ukraine. This side looks to be better than most in this underdog pile for sure. But look at the group they are in. England, Italy, Macedonia, and Malta. Italy and England will be the biggest test for sure. We saw England destroy this side 4-0 in the Euros. They were gassed out by then in the quarterfinals, but still, Italy are looking to be in great form once again after failing to qualify for the World Cup. They have been building momentum. Ukraine, however, in qualifier campaigns have very notable performances. In the World Cup qualifiers, for example, sure they failed to qualify, but in the group stage, they went undefeated. In a group with France, they got loads of draws, sure, but they got that playoff spot and just failed to do it on the final match day against Wales, thanks to Hennessy having a terrific performance. Ukraine managed to beat Scotland before then, but in the Nations League, Scotland topped them, which is why Scotland are not in this video. So it's a bit of a tricky one to address why Ukraine is in this pile and Scotland isn't, but like I said, pot 3 to 6 only. Before then, Ukraine also topped their Euro 2020 qualifiers group undefeated, in a group with Portugal, This is also the same qualifier run where they beat Serbia 5-0. This side is going to shock a lot of people, I have a feeling. I know they're not favorites to be first or second, but do not sleep on Ukraine in a fixture, even if it's against the likes of England or Italy. This side means business in qualifier runs. Right now, I'm going to put them at high hopes because they're going to be striving for that playoff spot most likely. Maybe they can surprise, and I hope they do, where they get first or second and automatically qualify. Very unfavorable draw, but they still have the quality, still what it takes. I just don't want to put them in all the way to say failure is not an option because they have a huge task against them. Norway, on the other hand, their group ain't easy, but definitely doable for their standards. So we'll see what happens with Ukraine. Best of luck to them. Now moving on to Macedonia. It's a very interesting spot for Macedonia. I already mentioned how difficult this group is, and I think Ukraine will be on edge compared to Macedonia. I hate to say it. I love this country so much. I was a huge fan of watching them in the last qualifier run. They had a very exciting playoff campaign, beating Italy. They're coming up against Italy again. Can they shock the world once again? I would love to see it, but right now, on the surface, it's not looking good for Macedonia. Yep, they're the first team I'm putting in this category, and come on, Macedonia, don't hate me for this. I think it's justified. Again, just like that playoff spot, this is a very unfavorable draw for you guys. We could see this side upset a giant at least once, sure, but I don't see this side doing it over every single international break. And then last, and I hate to say it, unfortunately, least out of this group, Malta. It just seems to be a common theme. The last team from every single group, so far at least, is going in that no chance pile. Moving on to Group D, we are not going to be talking about either Croatia or Wales. You could argue that Wales should be in this list, but we're jumping straight to Armenia. They obviously have their star man, Mkhitaryan, and we rarely see this side out of nowhere just have a mini spark and then going back to losing. We saw this in the World Cup qualifiers, and then in the Nations League, we saw them beat Ireland 1-0, but apart from that, they lost every other game, with some extremely hefty defeats in there as well, like losing to Ukraine 5-0. I don't want to say this side has no chance in this group, though. Croatia, I'm not even trying to sound biased here, look like favorites, sure. They randomly get caught slipping in qualifiers. They do the job, but they throw us off a lot. They sometimes put it down to the last minute. We saw it in the World Cup qualifiers. We saw it in the World Cup. Turkey looks to be an incredible side. We'll get into them right after this. But they are also extremely inconsistent. Armenia can take advantage of that. And Wales are going to be very unpredictable right now. There's obviously a few youngsters that have been turning up, but we're not going to be seeing Gareth Bale anymore as he's completely retired from football. I could be generous and say this side could surprise. We really could see the inconsistencies from these other teams give Armenia some kind of advantage, but they have just been really poor in form, which makes me not see them taking enough advantage, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to say Armenia are in the not looking good pile. Now moving on to Turkey, I just talked about their inconsistencies, but when you look at the squad on paper, they should be able to qualify for this tournament. They also topped their Nations League group, so they got that playoff spot. Burak Yilmaz has retired, sure, but many big names still there, like Çalhanoğlu. Of course, Turkey kind of built a reputation in the last Euros where everyone hyped them up so much, and they purely failed. But for this qualify run, I think they're in a situation where failure is not an option. They should be able to at least get second place, and who knows, maybe even first. I hope I'm wrong about that first place claim, obviously, but best of luck to Turkey. Now moving on to the last team in this group, Latvia. Normally we stick the last team in each group at the no chance pile, but I think Latvia deserve better than that. They were not in a difficult Nations League group, obviously, but they topped that, and in their World Cup qualifier group, they didn't have the best placement, sure, but they did frustrate many teams and swerve around the table. I mean, Latvia's heftiest defeat in the World Cup qualifiers was 2-0. And like I said, the group that they're in is filled with many possible inconsistencies from any of these teams. They don't make it easy for teams, man. I might get a lot of hate for this, but I'm putting them at good surprise. Now moving on to Group E, Albania. Poland and Czech Republic look like the favorites to qualify, as Albania have had a very disappointing Nations League campaign. Even without Russia in the group, they still very much struggled, and that was their perfect opportunity to prove themselves. But they sacked their manager, and now they got the Brazilian Silvinho. Of course, I love the passion this country brings. They have some of the most passionate fans out there. Unfortunately, though, one of their best players, Broja, the Albanians love this guy, the striker on Chelsea. He's been injured for quite some time, and he won't be returning until late June. So he definitely will be missing the first stretch of these qualifiers. I think that's a huge loss. He definitely adds to the firepower of that attack. I think it's great that Albania appoints a new manager, obviously, after their horrendous Nations League campaign. I've heard some Corinthians fans say that they weren't the biggest fan of him, but maybe he can turn it around for international duties. This is not an easy group for Albania, but it's definitely one where they can prove themselves. A lot of people love to boast about Hungary doing so well recently. But Albania did break their hearts in the World Cup qualifiers, beating them head-to-head twice. So Albania definitely do have their moments. Unfortunately, I just think the situation's a bit unclear right now. Decent amount of injuries, a new manager. I do have some hope for him, but it's just all a bit uncertain. It feels weird to say that they could surprise because, I mean, we know what Albania are capable of, but I think that category fits for them. They fit just right in the middle of all this because there's a lot of drawbacks going into this qualifiers, like these injuries, but under this new management, we could see them excel. That's why I'm a bit torn about Albania, but I think this is the right placement for them. Now moving on to the Faroe Islands, if we do see an upset where Albania do not qualify for that third place spot, I think it would be Faroe Islands to frustrate them. So I'm going to put them at not looking good, but they definitely has what it takes to surprise us. I mean, we've seen this side have a lot of thrilling encounters. We've seen them recently draw to Turkey, for example, 3-3. This might be one of the more exciting underdogs to watch. I just don't see them pulling through. I do think it's going to be a bit too tough for them. They definitely don't have no chance, but it's not looking good for me. But yeah, now for Moldova. Sorry to you guys. I'm not going to go too in depth. But we got Adam to the no chance pile. Maybe they can surprise, but I don't see it. Now moving on to Group F. Interesting team we have going over here, Sweden. They were looking so promising, one of the most exciting underdogs to watch, and they just really fell off. Ever since the World Cup qualifiers where they had to fall short to the playoffs, they got knocked out to Poland and just went downhill from there. They were horrendous in the Nations League. Yes, they weren't in the easiest group, but they still should not have fallen short to 4th, getting relegated. That's why they're in pot 3. That's why they're labeled as an underdog in this video. And it's interesting though because you could argue that they have some better components than the likes of Austria, who are also in the same group as them. Even though Belgium are definitely going through their own struggles right now with their golden generation disintegrating, they still seem to be favorites to top this group. But both Austria and Sweden are massive contenders to cause an upset, both of them qualifying over them, but I think it's going to be one or the other, which means Sweden needs to keep their head high. I mean, the talent is still there without a doubt, and they need to qualify for this tournament. They need to pick themselves back up. Failure is simply not an option for this country, so they're going at the top. There's just no working around it. Of course, Austria are still a solid side they shouldn't underestimate, but with the quality Sweden possess, Alexander Isak, Forsberg, plus so many other players, this side need to qualify. They need to go back to their glory days. Now for Azerbaijan, a massive underdog in this group, of course, because everyone's going to be talking about Belgium, Austria, or Sweden, but let's not rule out this side completely. I mean, they've got some informed players there, like both of their strikers who play on Karabakh. In their last Nations League run, they had a really bad start, but they picked things up in the second half, winning all their last 3 games. But in the World Cup qualifiers, they did not win a single game. They only got 1 point against Ireland. As an independent nation, they have yet to qualify for a European Championship. I think those other 3 teams are definitely just going to be a bit too much of a feat for them. I think they're really cutting it close. You can argue that they have no chance, of course, but I'll be a little bit generous to them and say it's just simply not looking good. Now for Estonia, I'm going to have to put them at no chance. It's hard to really judge their Nations League group as they were with Malta and San Marino. San Marino have yet to win a competitive match. Can't forget about what they did in the Euro 2012 qualifiers, obviously. They very much impressed me then. This ain't the same Estonia as 2012. I'm saying they have no chance. Maybe I'm being a bit too generous to Azerbaijan, but I have a bit more faith in Azerbaijan to do something in this group. Now moving on to Group G, starting off with Crna Gora. I want to give the highest of hopes to Montenegro, of course, but Stefan Savic, one of their best players, doesn't look to be at his peak anymore. They still got Marticic, sure, but can he really be the difference maker? Jovetic is currently injured and is aging. His return date is unknown. This is a very surprising back and forth squad, and Hungary and Serbia look like clear favorites to qualify. I'm just going to move a bit quick with this group and say they're both not looking good. Lithuania, I'm going to say, are the side that just don't really have a chance in this group. I'm doing Group G real dirty, it seems like, although I love a lot of these nations. Serbia have still yet to qualify for the Euros as an independent nation, so it would be wild if they somehow bottle this themselves. But this is their group to finally do it, I think, because apart from Hungary, a lot of these other sides are not looking to be, like I said, at peak condition. And that's why I'm doing this group so dirty. Best of luck to all these countries, though. Now moving on to Group H, starting off with Slovenia. Slovenia always seemed to have a pretty solid team, despite them never fully pulling through at the end. But now we're seeing the likes of youngster Šeško pulling through for Salzburg. Of course, they've had Oblak for so many years now. Their group's not easy, of course, but it's one where they could potentially have some impact. For the national team themselves, they should have high hopes, but I'm not going to necessarily say that it should be 100% there. In terms of us analyzing it on our own, I think they're a side that could surprise. Finland obviously have more history in these qualifiers. Denmark topped their World Cup qualifier group despite them disappointing in the actual tournament. Kazakhstan we'll get into a sec, but they're also looking to be in good form. Northern Ireland are a mixed bag. Very interesting group here, actually. Very tough to analyze all of these teams in one. Going to be a very unpredictable show, but I think Slovenia are contenders to shock a decent amount of people. Kazakhstan, I'm going to say the same thing. I think they're a side that could surprise. They had a terrific Nations League campaign, beating Slovakia head-to-head twice, topping their group, getting a playoff spot in this Euro qualifier, of course. So this is a perfect test for them, this group. And I think they do have potential to surprise with the great form that they're in. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they should have all the highest hopes, as in qualifier runs, they do sometimes disappoint and get gassed out, especially against the tougher teams. For example, we've seen them lose to France 8-0 in the World Cup qualifiers. My choice might be a bit generous when you look at that aspect, but their form seems to be improving, so I can't put them that low. And yeah, best of luck to Kazakhstan. Now looking at Northern Ireland, this side is not in great form at all. They were very disappointing in their Nations League group. Despite the shambolic Nations League performances, in these qualifier runs, we just randomly see this side pull through. Last time they made it all the way to the playoffs. I think Group H is extremely interesting, filled with possibility, filled with life, and I think 3 of those teams could surprise. But unfortunately, the last team we're looking at in this group, San Marino, haven't won a competitive match yet. There is just no chance. Absolutely no chance. If I'm going to bank on any of the teams to not qualify for Euro 2024, this is where I would put my money. I'm sorry, San Marino. I love you guys. Win your first game, please. That's all I ask. But this is a tough group. You've got so many sides that could surprise already. I don't see San Marino grabbing their first win in this qualifier campaign. Best of luck, though. Now for Group I. Like I said, it's a bit controversial that I did not include Israel in this video, but they deservingly got to pot 2, so we're just going to jump straight to Romania first. Romania had a pretty bad Nations League campaign until the end where they demolished Bosnia, but Bosnia already secured first place. I don't think they were trying too hard in that match. In the World Cup qualifiers, they looked to be clear for that playoff spot, but Macedonia took it from them at the end. If we're looking at Romania as a whole, I would say that they are not in the best condition right now. However, this group is filled with possibility. Kind of like Group H, except this group really is giving the underdogs an advantage here. I mean, the only team that really seems to impose a threat on paper is Switzerland. And even then, they could somehow mess things up. In my opinion, though, for second place, it's really going to be a fight between Israel, Kosovo, and Romania. Therefore, I'm going to put both of these teams at could surprise. I think they both deserve it, and going on more in depth with Kosovo, in the last Euro qualifiers, they were in a very difficult group. They even had a very interesting encounter with England, losing to them 5-3. They also have only just been approved by UEFA to participate in these competitions since, I think, 2015 or 2016. Kosovo are one of the newest international teams, and they have had some very impressive moments. I think they have a very solid shout at qualifying for their first ever major tournament. The general public doesn't have high hopes for them, but of course Kosovo will, and I gotta say they definitely could surprise. But now for the other 2 teams in this group, Belarus and Andorra. I don't mean to be cruel, but I don't have faith in either of them. Belarus with way too many hefty losses recently. They're both going in no chance. Damn, this list looks brutal, but we are going over underdogs here, where faith will not be very high in most of them, and we're not going over a lot of the bigger teams, of course. Moving on to the last group, starting off with Iceland. Bosnia is not considered an underdog since they're in pot 2 and they topped their Nations League group. Iceland, on the other hand, got second in their Nations League group after drawing every single match. This side, as we all know, have had a terrific underdog tale in Euro 2016. Can they qualify for this tournament again and tell another beautiful tale? Very different squad, obviously. I don't think it's as promising that this nation can pull through and qualify for this tournament, although they qualified for Euro 2016 and World Cup 2018. Despite not doing much in the World Cup 2018, they still should very much be proud that they qualified for 2 major tournaments in a row. I think Iceland could surprise. I know I'm putting a lot of teams at that tier and not many in the top 2, but when you look at all the other teams, it kind of makes sense. We've just learned it's never safe to count on Iceland. Now for the rest of my picks, might surprise some of you, but starting off with Luxembourg. This side obviously doesn't have the history of qualifying for the tournaments, but in more recent times within history, they have been surprising some other teams that they don't look like favorites against, like Ireland and Turkey. They will definitely have surprising moments in this group, but I don't know if they can handle the pressure throughout. So I'm going to say that Luxembourg are in a not looking good situation. I do see them at one point upsetting Slovakia, which we'll talk about in a second. But can they continuously hold off the pressure against these teams? That's what I'm worried about. And that's why I'm putting Luxembourg in the not looking good section. I just don't know if they have enough in them to ride it out throughout this entire qualified campaign. Slovakia are also in a not looking good scenario. They were terrible in the Nations League. They have been known to lose or draw to too many underdogs, man. And it's crazy because their back line's actually looking very solid. And in the midfield, Lobotka has been having a fantastic season with Napoli. Some great individuality on this team, but when they turn up as a unit, for some reason, they just fail to pull through a lot. With the quality Slovakia have, they should be a lot higher on this list. But right now, with the expectations of this squad, things are not looking good for them. And I'm going to have to put them in that tier as well. I think it's a doable group for Slovakia, but definitely, based on their form, a tough fleet. And then for Liechtenstein, obvious answer, I'm sorry, but no chance. This list might throw a lot of you off as I've only put 6 teams in the top 2 tiers. But we got to keep in mind we're talking about the underdogs here. A lot of them are not favored to qualify for the tournament. I'm going to leave the list at that. Let me know yours in the comments below where you agree and disagree with me with. I know this might cause a lot of controversy, but of course, I can't wait to see some of these teams prove me wrong. Thank you guys for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. Sorry for the wacky upload schedule lately. I'll be honest, life has been pretty brutal on me lately. Ever since this year's began, I've been dealing with a lot of problems with my back, but I'm back now. And I feel like I'm coming back at the perfect time. I cannot wait to see what happens with these Euro qualifiers. I will see you all very, very soon. Like I said, we got to do another prediction video. I did an early one, but I got to give you guys my final thoughts now that March is approaching. So, I will see you all soon. Take care. Lock noite.